Welcome, welcome to our monthly workshop Wednesday session. Today we've got a really exciting, kind of agenda set up for you. We're going to talk a little bit about FleetCommander feedback, and we're also going to get into the version 509 release. So lots of exciting things today, to say the least. Okay. So, for some of you have been with us for a few sessions now, and Workshop Wednesday is a monthly knowledge series that we put together. It's based on feedback from you, the client. And typically, if you've participated in our monthly surveys, we ask you how you're doing with FleetCommander, and we ask you where you need some help. And based on that feedback, we put these sessions together. So it's been invaluable to us, and we hope it's been invaluable to you. As I mentioned, your feedback in the survey really helps us drive content. So keep your thoughts coming. You can even send us emails after the fact and say, gee, it'd be great if you talked about, this, that, or the other thing. As I mentioned at the outset, the webinars are the third Wednesday of every month. So we try and keep a regular schedule and cadence about how we do this, and typically from 1 hour, 2 to 3 p.m. And again, we do want your feedback. So, please, oh, please help us help you. So before we begin, the webinar is recorded, as I mentioned. We will provide a copy of the recording and the slides that's going to be available for download by link. Typically, it's, within 24 hours of the session. Sometimes it's a little bit, the video has to get finalized, and then it has to get posted. And depending on the size, it can take a little bit. You can use your camera or not, that's your call, but everybody is muted. And so what we want to make sure of is, there's no background noise so that everybody can hear what's going on in the session. Typically, if you do have to ask a question or we want to ask you a question, we'll ask you to use your audio or your phone, but don't use both. Generally speaking, the best way to ask questions is to use the chat icon in Teams. So I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with Teams today. But if you look at the toolbar, you'll see the little chat bubble at the top. All you got to do is click it, and you can, tell us who you are and your organization, and certainly, what question you have, and we'll address it or do our best to address it or get back to you. Okay. So today's agenda, lots of interesting things. We're going to start this with, getting feedback, and we like to say, you don't say, because feedback, getting feedback is a really important aspect to improving your fleet operations. So we'll go through a couple of the basics: value of feedback, how to use the FleetCommander feedback form, requesting feedback by email, how to send it, how to customize it, how to, solicit ideas and promote participation. We'll also take a look at analyzing the feedback, and then, some tips for you to give us feedback, as well as any questions and answers that you've got. Once we get through part 1 of today's agenda, we're going to roll right into version 509 upgrade, and we'll go through a number of really cool things that we're releasing with the latest version of FleetCommander. Okay, so first and foremost, the value of feedback. Like everybody loves feedback, or generally speaking, most people like feedback. As it's always there, and you don't have to ask for. Typically, you don't have to ask for it. So if you ask for it, typically folks will give it to you. And if they don't, well, at least you tried to get it. We really appreciate your feedback as a company. It helps guide us, and it helps us, ensure that we provide you with the best level of services that we can. So whether we need to tailor our offering or provide new services, it's really important for us to hear from you. We think that feedback is effective listening. So, by you asking for feedback from your users, you're letting them know that you care about it and you really mean it. And that's a really big piece of managing a fleet effectively. You can use it as motivation. So, when you're asking for feedback, you can build better relationships with your staff and with your peers and with your clients. As a lot of you folks may know, you can use it to improve your performance. So it helps you formulate better decisions, as well as then improve and increase performance. And the things that you really want to look at is, do you have the right vehicle in the right place at the right time? Fundamentally, is it a good vehicle? Is it a bad vehicle? Did they have any problems? Does the process work, et cetera? So there's lots of things that you can do from a feedback standpoint And then lastly, it's a great tool for learning. So you can use feedback as a teachable moment. And, depending upon what comes back to you, a lot of folks say, gee, I got feedback and it asks a really important question and it caused us to either look at something in our policy or change our policy or add to our policy. And I think those are the important things, certainly the important aspects of feedback when you get it. Okay. In terms of FleetCommander, so a number of clients use feedback, a number of clients don't use feedback, but fundamentally, FleetCommander has a feedback form that is customizable. So again, we'll walk you through kind of where that is and how to do this today. But fundamentally, it's employed by the administrator. So the administrator has access to the form and to prompt users to provide feedback. And typically you can provide feedback in 3 areas: fleet operations, fleet staff, vehicles. So again, you get into this, staff, vehicles, and the system. So we're really trying to get, have you solicit feedback from your users so that they can tell you how things are going. Good car, bad car, great process. Was it easy, not easy? Could we do something to refine it? And those are the things that we want to make sure that we capture. And I think it's invaluable to you as well as a business, kind of as a provider of services in terms of vehicle sharing. When you look at the function for getting feedback within FleetCommander is a pre-configured email. So again, the administrator has the ability to make some of these changes within the email. And fundamentally, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're doing this on a regular basis. It's important that when feedback is solicited, the user has to tell you what site they're giving you feedback on. So again, it's based on a location in a site so that you can figure out exactly what they're talking about, whether it's a vehicle or a site or it's, some kind of an issue that they're experiencing. Okay. The next thing is the form itself. So again, the form is, provides some level of flexibility here. And you can see in this example, we're providing some ratings about, whether it's the staff or the vehicle or the system itself and how people feel about it. So whether it's, the comment is not applicable or whether it's poor, good, or excellent. And again, you're really aggregating data from a CSAT standpoint. So we're not getting at the NPS level of data, we're really getting at it from a CSAT standpoint. And again, it's very, very timely and important information for you because, frankly, you need to know whether or not there are any issues to be aware of and what you can do to mitigate those, okay? In terms of requesting feedback, so feedback is sent via email. So typically you have to, the administrator will go in and they can customize the email. They can, and again, we'll walk through this, how to customize the feedback form with any instructions. And then, also talk about providing some ideas for soliciting and increasing participation. So the feedback email itself, is a menu-driven item. So again, as you look at this, administrators have access to this and it's underneath tools, send email, get feedback. And so once you get into this form, you'll be able to see what that form looks like. Okay, so that's the menu location of it, and it's always on the menu. If you go into your site and you find that it's not there for whatever reason, maybe somebody asked for it to be removed, we can assist you in adding it back in. It's very easy to do. And we strongly encourage all fleets to use the feedback function. Okay, now in terms of the email itself, when you're thinking about sending it, it's all date, it's basically very parameterized. So, you have the ability to, define a date range. Some folks that really get into feedback do this on a weekly basis. So they're always going into the form and they're always sending it on a weekly basis. So they know that for the prior week, they had X activity and they can define whatever that 7-day period is or 5-day period. And they can select, all sites or selected sites, all usage types or selected usage types. And you can see here that, in the event that there was a requester involved, they could send feedback to the requester as well as the driver. So what the system will do is by selecting different aspects of this, it's really going to allow you to generate a list of, potential users that you want to send, the email to. Now, the nice thing about this is that you could potentially deselect people. So you can select everybody, deselect everybody, and then, essentially identify specific individuals that you want to do. And you can see in this case, there are some examples, in our dummy data set of requesters and drivers, where the driver is different than a requester, and then where they're both, it means that, the driver ultimately made the reservation. So they were one and the same individuals. So this gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of tailoring the messaging that goes off, to your drivers. Okay. Now, once you, get to the point of, having this configured, what it's going to do is, and you select that, it's going to basically validate that, yes, you've sent emails, and it's going to tell you who you sent emails to. So the system will generate a list, and it'll tell you exactly what went out. So whether you sent 1 out or 100 out or 1,000 out or something in between, it's going to give you all the details about the names, the count of emails, and then the period you sent them for. Okay. So again, pretty straightforward, very, very simple from that standpoint. Now, the nice thing about it is that when you look at this, your message fundamentally that you're sending is, you're sending them an email that has a link to a survey. So we're basically sending them a message that says, hey, please click on this link and provide us with some feedback. And so again, the way that the link is constructed is it's essentially the HTTPS followed by your site name, followed by agilefleet.com/feedback. And so, the only thing that's different about this is each URL is very specific to the site that it's generated from. So, if Ron and I had, 2 different sites, I couldn't send feedback to Ron's site, and Ron couldn't send feedback to my site. So only I can send feedback from my site, and Ron can send feedback from his site. So again, by the user clicking on that feedback link, it brings them right to that page where they can then provide, updates, and CSAT ratings. Now, one of the things that, we've talked about before is how to customize emails. And so, for those of you that have been with us a few months, we've addressed email customizations a couple of times. And so, there are links to, the March and April workshop Wednesdays within this presentation, and we'll keep those included. And again, same content, there's a great slide deck and there's a great video on how to tailor your emails, as well as some of the other ones. So, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at those if you really want to get into, tailoring the messaging and making it more, specific to your operation. It's a great thing to be able to do. It's a great thing to be able to personalize, and we highly recommend it. Certainly, as you get into this, if you need help from us, please don't hesitate to ask, either the CS team, myself and John, or any of the support folks. If you just send an email into FleetCommander support, fcsupport@agilefleet.com, they'll help you as well. Fundamentally, the thing you want to remember is, when you are looking to configure or customize your feedback message, again, it's an administrative function. You're going to go to Configure, Enterprise, and Layout. And then under the layout settings, you'll see a little link as indicated here that says Get Feedback Email Text. And then once you click on that link, your text shows up, in the editable window, in the WYSIWYG window below. So at that point, you can do various things like creating your own messaging. You could add a picture if you want. You could add, really make it very unique to your business. All right. So those are the things that you want to remember there. And again, once you're doing this, when you create your customized message, it shows up at the very top of the page where you're soliciting feedback. So it's important that, if you have very specific instructions for your business or what you're trying to do, that you give that to your end user. All right. And again, as you select feedback, the message that appears at the top of the page is entered in the window, and then once it's saved, it shows up at the top of the survey, and then the user will basically pick the site and then provide you with feedback around, what kind of services they received and what they thought of, the staff, the vehicle, and the system. All right. And you can see that in this case, they may say, hey, I had a problem, or I thought vehicle request was great, or vehicle return was something, or I reported an accident and it was problematic. So again, we give them that ability to provide feedback on certain aspects of the operation and of the process. Other things that you can do, and again, this is an example of, one of our clients, Scott County, and again, they use feedback as an important part of their business. And you can see that when you get into, trying to get feedback, from your users to make the system better, they've gone to the point of putting it right up front and center. So, when you log into the system, their welcome page clearly identifies, we want to know what you think. And, we want you to help us make the motor pool better. And so they're asking, their employees, within the county to solicit, feedback. And again, you can see that they've
Joe, we lost the sound.
Yeah, sorry, back again. Can you still see that, Ron?
Yep.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, Scott County, what they've done is they've given us that ability, their employees, the ability to really, provide feedback directly at any time. And again, they, it doesn't have to be about a reservation. It can be about anything. And I think, we would certainly, tell you that it's best to ask, get as much feedback as you can when you can from your employees, okay? Because again, it just helps you and it helps the process. The next thing is that you can put it as a menu item. So, instead of, I'm going to go back a page, if you look at this, Scott County's basically created a little feedback button at the bottom of the footer. An optional way that exists in FleetCommander also is to put it in the information menu. So you have that ability to put it in multiple places. In this case, it shows you, here it is over in the information menu and at the bottom. So you can really tailor the system to providing some information about it. Okay. And again, you could put it at a header. So it's really all about trying to engage your users at the end of the day. That's a really important aspect to running a successful fleet operation. It's engaging your users, it's getting their feedback to try and make things better for everybody. And so again, you've got the ability to put it in the header, you could put them in the welcome page, you can put it in the information section of the menu, you could put it in the footer. So you can really tailor your system to provide, feedback links at any point in the process, as well as then, send them out, emails on a regular basis. And again, this is just an example of the same kind of thing at the footer. Okay. In terms of looking at your feedback now. So, I think a lot of you, if you're not using feedback, one of the things that'll happen is you get two ways to look at feedback. You've got a feedback report that's automatically generated anytime somebody does provide feedback, within FleetCommander, and you've got a little, nice little gauge on the dashboard that shows you, how people are feeling about what you're offering. And so, in terms of looking at the report itself, again, it's underneath statistics, so reports, statistics, and feedback. And again, you can do it for a wide variety of, date range, as well as, site specific or all sites. You can, print the report in HTML, or you can drop it in an email to do, or I should say, drop it into Excel to do other analytics on it. So, it's very, very flexible in terms of what you can do with the report. And the important thing is that this is your feedback from those specific users. So you can see, here's an example where somebody said, gee, I want to provide feedback, and the system will generate response-driven data. It'll give you a date. It'll give you an overall score. And then fundamentally, it's going to break down what people thought about, in this case, the staff, the vehicle, and the system. Okay. So again, you can kind of see how this helps you. Certainly if you, have issues, and people score you low, then from that standpoint, it's a call to action for you. In this case where you had, no score for a vehicle, chances are if you went back and looked at that specific feedback, that would be a requester, right? Because they may not have driven the vehicle, so they have no feedback about it. And again, you can see that in this case, one of the things that you get is when you start looking at, the feedback that people provide, these are the comments that they're able to leave you. So again, it's not just getting a score, it's getting a score and getting some detail so that you can actually do something with it. Whether it's like, gee, I think we need to have little cards so that we can, do certain things about it, or everybody does a great job, or somebody was very helpful to me. So again, I think these are great things. Not only is it good for your user and your customer to give you feedback, it's great for you because again, you can see what people think, and you can communicate your successes to your department. So it's nice when you get positive feedback and somebody says, gee, the person that answered the phone was really helpful, or everybody does a really great job, whatever that may be. Those are very positive reinforcement messages that are great to share. And so I think everybody likes to hear that their services are appreciated and their work is appreciated. So again, I think it's really good to be able to do that. When looking at feedback within FleetCommander, so you don't have to run a report to see how you're doing. So every time feedback is provided, what the system's going to do is it's going to give you that, kind of fuel gauge look of red, yellow, and green about, how people feel about the staff, the vehicles, and the system, and then the aggregate rating. So you can see exactly how you're performing and where you're performing well or where you may not be performing well and need to provide some level of focus. So it's very, very helpful. If you don't have anything on your system today, it means you have no data. So the way that FleetCommander works, and again, it's really important, is if you're looking at your dashboard, in the lower right corner of it, there's a customer satisfaction area. And if you don't have, the graphs showing up, it means that you have no feedback. So it's something to kind of put on your list of things to do and to start really thinking about how you can implement feedback in the benefits that, it can provide to your organization. Certainly as you think about your business plans and how you're delivering services, it could be a very, integral part of how you're getting measured at the end of the day, in terms of the quality of your service, which is very, very important. And then lastly, offering feedback. So I think a lot of folks on this call, you hear from us on a very regular basis, and I'll be the first to apologize if we do it too often, but excuse me, we really want to hear from you. We truly, truly want to hear from you. From an Agile standpoint, we like to hear from you in a couple of places. When we provide system implementations, we always ask every client that we implement and go live, how do you think we did? Because we look at that very seriously, and we want to provide the best implementation services that we can. So if you tell us, gee, you really screwed it up and, you could improve this, that, or the other thing, you can be assured that we will take that to heart and we will go back and take a look at that and see what we can do to fix it. We send pretty much a monthly, what we call a Net Promoter Score survey to selected clients every month. We don't send it to everybody every month because we don't want to inundate you. But you will see it a couple of times a year. So if you do get a survey email from us, I would truly appreciate you responding to it. I really want to hear what you think. And again, we've redesigned the survey, and the way the survey starts off today is, how are you doing? If you can tell us how you're doing, it will really help us in terms of us tailoring our services to you. So that's a very critical piece of it. And then lastly, Workshop Wednesday. This is the fifth Workshop Wednesday session that we've run this year. We get a great group of regular clients that attend, and people tell us it's great, and we want to know what we can do to make it better. And so typically what you'll do is you'll see a copy of it. We'll send the link out in this presentation just so you have it. Okay. And any questions about feedback at this point?
Nothing in the chat. Oh, Jim Montgomery. Jim, go ahead.
He may be muted, Ron.
Hey, Jim, you can type or unmute, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, it probably better to type.
All right, hang on a minute.
There he is.
Go ahead, Jim. Just speak up. Forget typing. And by the way, I'm responding to your email now, Jim.
Okay. All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. I put it in a Word document so I wouldn't forget it. It seems that this is more tailored to the motor pool module. Is there any way to request feedback for the maintenance module?
So at this point in time, we typically look at feedback on motor pool. However, I will take your comment, Jim, and see what we can do on the maintenance side.
Okay, because we will be using maintenance very heavily.
Okay.
And the other question is, can people giving feedback, and I may have missed it, if I did, I apologize, can they give feedback anonymously?
Well, right now it's typically they can. They don't have to enter in there. So if you remember on the forum, there was a place to enter in the reservation number. I mean, we're probably going to know who they are because we sent them an email. So it's a little bit difficult to do that if you're doing it through email. However, and I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit, if you folks don't mind. So give me a minute. I'm gonna just if you think about this, if you think about this slide with Scott County, they're basically allowing anybody to give feedback at any time. So in this case, it's anonymous. So depending on how you do it, if you're sending an email out, you're going to know who you sent it to and who you get a response from. And if you're doing it anonymously, and then you can do it anonymously this way. So one of the interesting things you could do, Jim, is when we do feedback, is we could always, configure feedback, even though it's got some level of motor pool in there, to provide the ability to capture comments as it relates to the maintenance process.
Okay, thank you.
And then Mike Wilson asked a question that Shauna was kind enough to respond to. And for everyone who didn't see the chat, if a customer has multiple interactions, meaning multiple rentals over the course of a period, will they only get one survey or a survey for each interaction? And Shauna was kind enough to respond that they only get one survey per interaction.
That's correct.
One survey per email. When you send them an email, it basically, effectively merges all of their transactions and sends them one.
Correct.
Email.
So that's exactly right. So if they had 10 reservations in the system, it would basically send them one email to get their opinion about what their experience was over 10 uses. Okay. Anything else? If not, let's get to the exciting stuff. Even though feedback is exciting, truly, I do want it. So 509 is great. I'm really looking forward to getting this out, into your hands, and you'll be seeing it anytime now, certainly on the Agile hosted sites, and then we'll talk about really schedule for self-hosted sites. But getting into 509, so in terms of the team for for the upgrade, again, there's myself and John, and a lot of you folks, if not everybody, knows Ian. So from a support standpoint, so if there are any questions as you get through this, you can reach out to any of us, and we'll help you out with questions that you've got about version 509. Okay. So again, there's a lot of things to cover today. We're going to give this, cover it at a high level. And, as you get into 509 and starting to look at it in your own site, we would welcome the opportunity to meet with you one-on-one if you want to go through certain aspects of that. Okay. So some really great features in 509. First and foremost, a lot of you folks that have been in FleetCommander for a long time, that we do, vehicles and fuel and maintenance. But now we're expanding, the application to provide expense management. So when you think about total cost of ownership, there's a lot that ends up impacting a vehicle in its life cycle costs that isn't fuel or maintenance. And so things like insurance or overhead or replacement fund, other miscellaneous expenses that you've got. And so what 509 does, it provides a framework where you can now start importing that data into FleetCommander and configuring the system so that you can aggregate, different categories of expenses. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We've made some, nice changes in terms of forgot password. For a lot of you folks that know forgot password, that it was sending previously, a user password in clear text, which isn't great. And so we've changed that process. We continue to refine auto cancellation. So I think a lot of you folks, if you know auto cancellation, you know that if you wanted to cancel a reservation, you could, but it didn't really cancel the reservation until after it should have ended anyway. So it really didn't, provide the right level of improved utilization that you should expect. And this one does, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We've made changes to time zones. So again, some of the messaging within the application wasn't in the driver's time zone, so that's now fixed. We've made another, a series of other enhancements and updates, specifically, in terms of the GPS area, if you're using GPSI, and continue modernization of the platform into the .NET framework. And we'll talk about the release schedule. So with that, we'll get into a little bit more of, these specific areas, now. So total cost of ownership. So what this does is it's an extension of FleetCommander's core capability, and it allows you to create and capture and report on a wide variety of vehicle expenses. So whether it's fixed, operating, non-operating, incidental, and acquisition. So if you think about a vehicle and you think about the care and feeding of a vehicle over its life cycle, what we're trying to do here is give you that ability to capture all the different cost elements that may impact a vehicle over its life. So fixed costs, operating costs. So when you think about, things like fixed costs, you may have things like, potentially insurance. You may have overheads that are considered fixed costs. You may have things like replacement funds that are, either operating or fixed, depending on how your model works. You may have other miscellaneous things that are not operating but related. Incidental costs, car washes, tolls, tickets, etc. And then any other acquisition fees, or charges that you may have. From an application standpoint, what we've done is we've architected, parent-child categories in terms of how we categorize the expenses. So the parent categories are always in the fixed, the operating, incidental, and then the child, will have some standard, but there's also configurable types that you can add in there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. To help you better look at this data, what we've done is we've added, what we call a TCO table on the asset. So as you look at an asset now, you can look at your maintenance costs and your fuel costs, but now you've got a section where you can look at everything else. So it's great. It's really going to be kind of a nice thing. We're going to incorporate the financials from maintenance and fuel. So again, we're going to be kind of mapping that into a default maintenance account. And we're going to add a new account code field on the asset profile. So, you know, many of our clients use account codes, not so much department codes, but account codes in terms of, you know, having a vehicle, and that vehicle, you know, sits in an account within the organization. And then all of those, you know, expenses, whether it's maintenance or fuel or, you know, other expenses, roll up to that account. And so this is going to provide the ability to do that. We provided a new interface so that you can import expenses from external systems, and which is great. So again, it's a generic import, and it's designed to capture that. And we've also introduced an export so that you can get the data out of the system. We've introduced a brand new tool that's going to allow you to calculate and apply a variety of costs. So let's say, for example, that, you know, part of your business, you have to allocate out insurance costs on a monthly basis, you know, for your fleet. So what the system would do is it's going to allow you to allocate out, you know, insurance costs to your fleet, or overhead costs to your fleet, or replacement fund costs to your fleet based on some model. So again, it's a complicated area. It takes some time, you know, to kind of work through and understand how you want to do it or what you want to do. So we encourage you to, you know, contact support or contact us, and we'll help you get through it. Okay. So that's just getting into the very high level. So when we start thinking about TCO and what it really means, you can see that we've got, you know, in various categories set up. So fixed, operating, non-operating, incidental, and acquisition. And then underneath it, we've got different subcategories. So these are all going to be standard subcategories that are going to be within the system. You've also got the ability to create your own subcategories underneath these main categories. So again, if you've got something that doesn't fit into this model, you can add your own. And again, you know, the bottom table is just an example of what it looks like in FleetCommander. So it's really just to kind of give you that quick view of, you know, here's what the table looks like. And again, really the important thing is you've got fixed, and then you've got different subcategories related to fixed. Okay. So really a great, you know, benefit of it. When you get, when you get into the asset, now the asset is nice because what we've done is as you bring data into the system, you've got the ability where you can, you know, number one, see the data. And again, the other nice thing that you can do is you can filter the data. So, you know, if I'm looking at a specific vehicle and I wanted to see how much, you know, money I spent on insurance, or how much money I spent on insurance, or overhead, or replacement fund, I could do that. I could easily filter that data and see exactly what's going on. And again, you know, the system also provides a report so that you can generate that data out, you know, put it into HTML or put it into Excel and manipulate it further. So hopefully it's going to help you, you know, as you think about managing costs on your vehicles and then doing, you know, further budgets and analysis of it. Okay. In terms of, you know, the expense summary. So, you know, when we get into the reporting, like many of the other FleetCommander reports, this is a very parameterized report. So that means that you have lots and lots of capabilities to get data at either the individual vehicle level, or certainly based on broad categories and locations. So, you know, if you have many vehicles across many sites and you're trying to really understand what's going on at a specific site for a series of vehicles, you've got that ability to do that. And again, you can then pick based on the categories and the subcategories, you know, the kinds of expenses that you want to see. So very, very flexible from that standpoint. And it should be really a great, you know, little tool going forward. The next item is getting into auto cancellation. So, you know, for those of you that are using auto cancellation today, as I mentioned, you'll note it, you'll remember that the way it was originally configured, auto cancellation worked at the end of a reservation. So you would configure auto cancellation. If somebody didn't pick the vehicle up, the reservation would have to time out before auto cancellation triggered. With 509, we've changed it. So now you have the ability to configure, any kind of an interval that you want. Obviously, we've set a default, time in there of 4 hours because we don't want to impact anybody's site. But fundamentally, what this means is that if your process is to allow drivers to make reservations on their own, so, create automatic, create their own reservation and then do auto assignment, and they don't pick a vehicle up, you can now cancel the reservation 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever minutes you want, after the reservation start time. So this is a really great feature, to be honest with you, and it should really help you improve your utilization, because now, what's going to happen is if I book a vehicle for 3 o'clock and I don't show up to pick that vehicle up, if we've got a 15-minute cancellation window, it means at 3:15 that vehicle goes back and it's now available, so somebody else can get that vehicle and use it. So I would strongly encourage everybody to use this. You should really be using this because it's only going to help your utilization at the end of the day. It's going to make, it's going to have, provide you with the ability to have more vehicles in service, especially if, you do have a lot of, potential cancellations or no-shows. Okay. And again, to get there, you've got to be an administrator, but you're going to go, configure site settings and edit site. So the important thing is that this is a site-based parameter. It's not a global parameter. So you can do different times at different sites. All right. And that's really important as well. So here's an example of what it looks like. So in this case, you can see that we've got configure site settings, again, underneath the general tab, we're going to edit, the reservations tab. And now we've got the configurable threshold, and you'll be able to see cancel reservations after X number of minutes. And so you want a minimum of 5. Personally, I would recommend somewhere in the 15 to 30 minutes would probably be good. Depending on what your business does, you may have a lot of folks that say, gee, I need more flexibility there. Okay, fine. You can make it longer, but everybody should be using this. It's highly recommended as a best practice. Okay. Password reset. So this is another great change in the system. So previously, we all know and love password resets. However, the way that FleetCommander was architected is, when you logged into the page, if you forgot your password, fundamentally the user would get an email, it would have in clear text, as part of the email message, their password. So from a security standpoint, that was obviously a concern to us, and we wanted to change it. Now the interesting thing is, and I have to say is, if you are using single sign-on, then the passwords are managed differently, right? So typically when you use an SSO environment, you're managing the passwords, in your local system. And so you're not able to take advantage of this, but that's okay. There's typically another way where those passwords are updated or changed. But in this case with FleetCommander, what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we say, okay, from a user standpoint, when I click on forgot password, essentially what's going to happen is the user is going to enter in their username, and then they're going to be sent a token. So it's very, very different in terms of how they're going to reset their account. So it fundamentally changes it, from using the link to getting a token that has a time limit on it. And so if they, forget their password and, they try and reset their account and they don't, receive the token, click on the token, whatever it is, then they'll have to do it again, or they'll have to ask you for assistance. Okay. Generally speaking, they should be able to simply reset their account. Now, the password reset function, again, it's an enterprise setting. It's underneath users. And again, this is a global setting. So as you think about, FleetCommander, and you think about managing the user, we want to make sure that we've got consistency across, all users in terms of, how we're constructing a password. So whether or not we have things like, enable forgot password, the number of attempts we want to give them, the lockout duration, whether or not you want to have them update their password every so many days. And then obviously strength. So the length, the minimum length, the maximum length, the uppercase, the lowercase, the numerics, and special characters. So whether you want to enforce those. Now, in terms of the token limit, you've got the ability to specify a specific amount of time for the token to live. When we look at this, we set it as 60. You could decide that you wanted to give them 10 minutes, 5 minutes. You need to give them some amount of time just in case. So I would say no less than 15 minutes. And I would certainly think that 60 minutes is probably, a good upper end there as well. However, you may want to talk to your, security team about it, just to make sure that, the application is constructed and configured consistently with your organization rules. Okay. Telematics. So a couple of things with telematics. As we worked with a variety of clients that are using GPSI, one of the things that we found is that getting, I would say, stray mileages every so often. And for those of you that do, in fact, use GPS, you'll note you've seen situations where, the mileages can change, with the telematic device. And that can be driven by a wide number of reasons. Whether it's an issue with, the vehicle, whether it's an issue with, a change in something in the vehicle, whether it's the computer or the head, the odometer head. Sometimes, the device itself will jump. Sometimes it'll jump with an update, et cetera. And so, one of the things, so what we're trying to do with this in the landmarks is, and especially on the landmark side, is if you're using, GPSI and you're, getting an odometer off when the vehicle is turned off, and it's going to update, the reservation event to closed. So I'm a driver, I'm returning my vehicle, but I go into a parking garage. Typically that's where you've had problems communicating. So the device loses connectivity. The system never receives the odometer. And so as a result of that, it never gets a returning mileage and it causes a problem. So what we've done with GPSI is, in this first step, in terms of dealing with landmarks, is we've provided the ability to create a geofence, a landmark, within the GPSI solution. And then based on that landmark, whenever your vehicle goes through the landmark, it'll send an odometer, just like when it does at, trip off, or I should say ignition off. So again, it solves the problem of somebody returning a vehicle, going into a parking garage, losing connectivity, and the trip not getting updated. Now, because you've got the parking garage geofenced, as soon as they cross that geofence threshold, the system will automatically send an odometer and, provide, whatever that reading is. So it'll allow you to close out that record. So again, you can see here, there's a little bit of a nuance in terms of looking at the mileage tab, and you can see that, we've marked, obviously in vehicle hardware, but also that it was a landmark driven event. So it wasn't an ignition off event, it was a landmark event. And I think that's the big distinction here. Okay. And again, it's really designed to provide, that flexibility. And typically you don't need this unless you have, a situation where somebody's going into a garage or some underground structure and they're losing and they're losing signal. But fundamentally it does improve the overall quality of the data in your system. and it certainly enhances and reduces the delay in terms of getting that data for your end user and kind of making the process more seamless. There's a couple of links in here in terms of, if you have access to your own portal in GPSI because you're an enterprise client, there's a link in terms of how to create that landmark. And again, we are very happy to help you do this. If you're only getting data from GPSI, then you just need to reach out to Agile and we'll create the landmarks for you. And so from that standpoint, there's a link to one of our internal documents that you can fill out and submit, and we'll go into the GPSI portal and create the landmark for you, okay? So again, trying to make it as easy as we can for you to get the most out of the system. Now the next piece is, as I started that, is talking about the mileage. And, as I mentioned, sometimes you get, kind of interesting mileages from, telematics, whether it's not just, GPSI, it can be Geotab, it can be virtually any telematics provider, because things happen. I've seen it in countless providers, with some, I don't want to say frequency, but it does happen with, over time. And so what we've done is, in order to mitigate that and prevent situations where your mileages can jump in the system, what we've done is we've created, kind of a setting on the vehicle, and again, so you can identify if the vehicle's got, a telematics device or not, what that threshold should look like. So, you may have a situation where a vehicle's out driving and something happens, maybe the device gets unupdated, maybe, it may have some other problem, but the mileage jumps from 10,000 to 100,000. What this is going to do is it's going to prevent that 100,000 mile reading from entering the system. So what you want to do is you want to go into enterprise settings on the vehicle tab, and we're going to define a threshold. So if you think about what your average vehicle use is in a day, if your vehicle drives 300 miles, 500 miles, 1,000 miles, that's the upper level that you want to set this parameter to. You don't want to set it at 10,000. You don't want to set it at 20,000. You want to set it at something reasonable because your goal of this is to stop bad data. Okay. So, realistically, maybe 500 miles or 1,000 miles is a good threshold that you can set this to. And again, we've defaulted it to 1,000 miles. It cannot be blank and it must be a whole number. So again, it's not going to affect anything else that you do. It's just a validation reading so that the system will look at the odometer coming in, compare it to the last reading that it's got and say, yes, this is good, or no, this is bad. And then if it's bad, you can see that what we've done is we've created another table where we can capture all of these invalid mileages. So there's a way now to look at the data and say, yes, there's an issue with this. So maybe the device is bad. Or maybe something else happened in terms of the vehicle. The ECM, the ECU is going bad, or the odometer head's going bad. So there's a lot of different things that you can do there. Okay. And again, one of the new features that we've released with 509 is the invalid mileage report. So again, what this is going to do is it's going to give you the ability to see where you're getting those bad readings from. And again, anything that shows up in this report hasn't been written back to the asset profile, because again, we don't want to give you bad data. We're trying to make sure that whatever you get from your telematics is solid data. And so what this does is that it provides that, error checking dynamically so that as you get that reading real time, the system's going to say, yes, this is good. No, this is bad. If it's bad, it shows up in this other table and report, and you can then go assess whether or not, you may have some other issue going on. Okay. And again, you can see that, underneath reports, assets, and then asset mileage invalid. Okay. A couple of other things that we've done, a couple of other things that we've done on the report side is the motor pool utilization. As we went through, one of the nice things about, Agile and what we try and do is, we're always looking at our data and we're always looking at our reports. And, when we find problems, we want to fix it, without you having to tell us about it. And so we've seen some issues where, holidays, when you were kind of running reports and counting holidays, they weren't being counted correctly. So that's been fixed. And we've also got, some changes, on the reservation details extra report. And so again, this gets back into, kind of, date and time zone handling. So, we've made changes where we now handle dates and time zones differently so that it's more consistent with where the user is, not so much, where, when the report is getting run. So it's going to be a whole lot better for you folks. In terms of, looking at the invalid mileage report, this is what it looks like. So again, you can see it's a pretty straightforward report. And it's very similar to the asset mileage report, right? Only this one is invalid mileages. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to tell you what the vehicle is, how it was created, when it was created, what the source was, the start, the end date, the start mileage, the end mileages, and you can see exactly, what the condition was. So whether it's a trim complete, ignition off, etc. So again, much more detailed information about how things are performing. Getting into other product enhancements and updates. So this is a nice feature for those of you that are using telematics. And again, what we've done is we've modified the asset dump report. And again, now you can get your telematic serial numbers, which is great. So, regardless of what you're using, if you're using GPSI, Geotab, or Verizon, any of these three providers, the unit ID will now show up in terms of, in the report. And we've also fixed, an issue with the location filter. So, regardless of what it is, you'll get that data now and be able to do something else with it, whether it's report on and manage an inventory, if that's what you need to do. And then in terms of, location filterings, I think that there was an issue where some of the data may have been double counted. That's been resolved as well. Statistics summary report. So lots of little changes to this report. We had an issue where some of the results are being double counted based on specific usage types. That's been fixed. We've made some other changes to the reservation where it's added modified sections. So again, things where you've got situations of it rejected and expired. Those statuses aren't used anymore, so those have been deprecated. We've now shown, pending reservations and created and modified within the date range. Canceled shows reservations canceled within the date range. Completed, shows completed with the actual date range in the date range. So again, it's really just refining the data and making sure that as you filter your data, we're giving you things that are compliant to what your parameters are. And the same thing with approved. So if you want to see things that were approved, created, approved, or modified within a date range, it's going to show you that more consistently now. And the last piece here is if an approved reservation was completed, it's going to show you as completed but not as bold. So again, the goal is to show you completed data. If something was approved but not fulfilled, then it will show up as approved. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. And then a couple of other things here. So late departing and returning emails. So again, there was an issue in terms of time zone. So the time zone wasn't accurately reflecting the driver's time zone. And we've seen issues where somebody would run the report and they would look at the data and it would show, potentially an hour differently because they were in a time zone that was different than the driver's time zone. And so now what we've done is we've fixed that so that it's consistently using the driver's time zone. And again, the main reason for that was, the times were fundamentally based on Eastern time. So we've changed that. And as part and parcel to that, one of the things that we've done is we've improved the way that the time zone tables have been architected. So what we've done is we fixed that and, we kind of brought it into standard, with the, kind of the internet assigned numbers authority. So for those of you folks who like to track internet authorities, this is a new one on me, but I suppose everybody's responsible for something. These folks do the time zones. We've resolved, an issue on the site administrative position. So There was a problem, when somebody logged in as an administrator, they didn't have access to all of the site's administrative functions. That's now been fixed. We've changed the expense type, so now the default rate is 4 decimal places, and again, you need that for some types of transactions. So we've made that more flexible. And then we've deprecated a couple of billing charge types. So the vehicle usage fee, that's really used by the system, and it's not something that's configurable, so we've taken it off the list to eliminate confusion. Another nice thing that we've done is if you are using the My Schedule URL, we've made that so it's now visible and it could potentially be changed. We want to make sure that if you need to change this, you contact us first. Don't just change it, okay? So again, it's really important that if you do want to change this for whatever reason, reach out to the support team and they'll let you know how and what you can do on it, okay? Because it does use some dynamic links, that we, talked about previously, and those are defined as, the double @ signs. And then we've made a couple of other changes in terms of account validation. So previously you saw those on user registration in PickQuick, or I should say QuickPick, and now those have been hidden. So those will automatically pull from other sources where they're configured. Asset profile, we fixed, some navigation issues. So again, there were a couple of problems in terms of looking at the history and the subnav. When you were sorting by task and then clicking the profile, it was kind of losing its focus. So we made a change to correct that. And again, as you can see, it basically takes the administrator to the profile instead of going back to the managed vehicle. So again, it stays, it stays within the asset profile itself. And we made some changes to correct some of the dashboard on the maintenance side filtering. So again, when you look at the filtering, it basically now reacts correctly to the dashboard filters corrected, or I should say selected. And, you can now see that for some of the other characteristics in the dashboard, vehicles that are in inspection or prep in vehicle fleet, have been corrected because there were some errors in terms of how those values are being populated. So we've looked at the logic and cleaned those up. So lots of little nuanced things there. For you folks that are self-hosted, there was an issue on the vehicle dashboard when you rolled over the, kind of the reservation and you saw either the reservation, the asset, or the driver hyperlinks. There was an issue where those weren't, opening correctly and causing an error. We've been able to resolve that. So now those, once you get the new release of FleetCommander, those will operate as they should. We've corrected an issue with the add part feature. So again, if you had a situation and you were doing a part that already was there, it didn't have to go through an extra step of refreshing the page to place the part. It just placed the part. So again, that should help, folks using, parts and maintenance. And then, obviously when you get into doing some of these things for old work orders, when you change the status, closed work order to open, it was basically generating an error on the part markup schedule. So there are a lot of little things that we've changed there that should cause, hopefully make life a little bit easier for you. I know that we're getting a little bit short on time, so I'm gonna, make sure that we get through all of these things. Access group filtering. So again, situations where we had some filters that were causing some issues, those have been corrected. We've made a number of changes in terms of managing fuel. So again, there were issues in terms of how the paging links were being rendered. And so, those are now corrected so that if you had filters selected, they're not getting lost, which is great. Again, selecting transaction dates, no longer causes an error. And, now the save defaults and clear defaults work as intended. So there was an issue where the defaults weren't getting saved properly or getting cleared properly, which was causing an issue. So lots of little changes, in terms of the functionality, which should hopefully make your life better and make it, make some of these reports more valuable to you. On the reservation side, again, editing the reservation, only the active types show in the in the type dropdown, whereas previously it was showing things that weren't active. Obviously that causes confusion, so that's been corrected. And then, custom fields. So if you are using custom fields, there was an issue where it wasn't necessarily showing you when you entered more than 50 characters in the custom field. And so now it does, so that you kind of maintain, the correct amount of characters in the field that it's designed for. We've changed some of the hard-coded asset and lease fields. So those have been removed from the reservation. Again, they really were never used and not needed, so those have been deprecated. And then, things like asset sequence, lease deduction schedule, again, those have been removed as well. So again, as we go through and continue refining and updating the product, we're certainly making conscious choices about how do we make it better, easier, streamline it, and more robust to take out things that frankly, don't add a lot of value or weren't really used within the application. A couple of last things that we get into, and that is, motor pool utilization by asset type. So again, that reports now, in the .NET framework, so that's great. And as part of that rewrite to .NET, we fixed the usage types filters. So again, there was an issue with the number of assets getting double counted if multiple usage types were selected. And then we've, fixed an issue in terms of the hyperlinking to the vehicles. So again, now you're able to kind of drill into it to show the activity. There are a few reports that we deprecated. So again, a lot of you folks that, have been with us for a while, at one point in time, we had, some technology called UDCs. And, they were kind of a predecessor to GPS, if you want to think about it that way. But fundamentally, it was an in-vehicle based device that used a wireless access point to communicate instead of cellular service. And so those reports are now deprecated because UDCs have been deprecated within FleetCommander as well. And then there's two other reports, cars mileage and fuel summary and cars utilization. We've checked our client base and we don't believe anybody are using those two reports. However, if you are using the report and maybe we didn't know it and it's disappeared, please let us know and we can help you out with that. Okay. And then lastly, I'm not going to go through this list because it's a big list, but these reports have all been rewritten. So there's a lot of reports that have been rewritten. And again, this will be in the package. And so these been updated. The report functionality was checked and retested, and it was all deemed to be correct. So we didn't make any changes to how the reports work. And then in terms of the most important thing, which is release schedule. So the good news is that we have actually started rolling out 509. We started very late last week and did a couple of, maybe about a dozen sites. And we're going to be commencing, all other client sites, starting today. So, as your site gets updated, you'll be notified. And then on the self-hosted sites, we're looking at the end of July, early August to get a release package out to you. And so that's kind of where we are today. Just a couple of last things before we get into any other questions about this, and that is, I just want to remind everybody that, we are doing the FleetCommander User Conference this year. So again, it's at the hotel at College Park, Maryland, October 4th to 6th. Hopefully folks can join us there. We think it's going to be a great session. So over those, 2 days. So it starts at noon on the 4th and ends at noon on the 6th. So, hopefully you'll be able to come in and attend that. So that'll be good to see you all. And, obviously, I think a lot of you folks know that, if you do need online resources or any kind of resources, we provide a variety of online content, both on, client and Agile Fleet blogs, as well as ongoing, education, white papers, etc. So again, please do check those. There's a lot of great information there. We're going to be updating a lot of that content as well. So please make sure you check back on a regular basis to look at that, and certainly join us for Workshop Wednesday, every month. And, we want to hear from you. So I know, we tend to, kind of chase you down and but we'd love to hear from you and hear about your success. Everybody does it a little bit differently. And I think all of your peers, if it's one thing that I've learned is that, your peers also want to hear, where folks are doing similar things or different things. So there's a learning opportunity for everybody here. So if you'd like to chat about that, we'd love to talk to you about it in terms of, putting something together, to be able to share your experience and how you're managing your fleet and some of the great things that you've done. So, help yourself and help your peers and, kind of be a thought leader there. And then, just the basics. So if you need help, your primary channel is Agile Support. So hit them up at fcsupport@agilefleet.com or, extension 2 on our main phone number. You can contact myself or John directly, and you can use the CS email, or you can just give us a ring. And again, our extensions are just a little bit off, but 510 or 515, off of Agile's main number. Any questions about the release? So let's see. So Jim, you asked a question about TCO and odometer reading. So you are going to be able to generate cost per mile in the report. So when you generate the report, the expense, or I should say, the expense report, what it's going to do is it's going to aggregate all of your expenses. So it's going to aggregate your fuel, your maintenance, and any of your expense types. And then it's going to generate a cost per mile for that. So yes, it's going to give you that. Mike Wilson, you asked, in an SSO will forgot passwords still work? And the answer to that is no. Because passwords are in SSO, passwords are controlled differently. They're not controlled through the app. They're not controlled in the application. So where passwords are managed within FleetCommander, then it works. If they're managed outside of FleetCommander, then your SSO tool would control, the management, creation, update of the password. Any other questions? All right. Well, I don't have anything else. I truly appreciate everybody spending some time today to kind of, meet with us and sit through, number one, getting feedback. And again, as I've said, I really do want to hear from you. So please, tell me how we're doing. We really want to hear from you. If we can help you in any way, that, if you need assistance implementing new features, if you need training, we've been working with a large number of clients recently on refresher training because folks are coming back and they're restarting operations. So if you need training, please reach out to us and we'll do what we can to help you there. Again, if you do have odometer integrity issues, that's something that we should chat about and figure out how do we solve those, and whether it's through telematics or something else. If you want to bring your fuel in, again, we do a wide variety of fuel imports. And if you want to consider billing, remember, FleetCommander's got 5 standard algorithms to deal with. So, there's a lot of flexibility in what this application is giving you right out of the box. So take advantage of it to kind of help manage your business a little bit better. And then lastly, obviously, streamlining operations. The vast majority of our clients use kiosks and key boxes, and it's a very effective way to kind of manage the business and reduce overhead and make it truly self-service, which is, what folks are looking for. So, next up, we're next month, hope to see you back. We're going to be doing a much deeper dive into total cost of ownership. So we'll really get into the nits and grits of that one. So I hope to see everybody back at that. And then we'll get into in September dispatching and auto and manual vehicle assignments. And then in October, we'll get into reservation cancellation tools. That'll occur after the user group. So we're going to be covering a lot of really interesting content in the user group. So hopefully we'll see you there as well. And I think with that, thanks so much for attending, everybody.